You're listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we are chatting with international soloist and pedagogue Amit Peled. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Amit is in town to perform the Saint-Saëns Cello Concerto with the Bellingham Symphony. Can you tell us about your relationship with that piece and the first time you played it?
Yeah, so the Saint-Saëns Cello Concerto is a piece that all of us cellists, we play as teenagers. This is one of the first big concertos we play. And then we think, we know how to play the cello when we played when we were 14, 15. But then you realize when years goes by that, maybe I didn't do it so well and I have a lot to learn and maybe go back to it. And I had this experience. I played it first with orchestra when I was a teenager, and I thought, I'm done with it. Now I can move to the Dvořák and Elgar and Schumann. But luckily, I was asked to play it when I was in my mid-20s and then early 30s and now in my early 40s. And I can just see the difference between each period in my life playing this piece. And it's not easy at all. Mm-hmm. It has so much in it. And I'm thankful that I learned it when I was a teenager, but I cannot compare now to that time. And it's one of our biggest concertos by all means, period. Saint-Saëns was a pioneering composer in the sense that he wrote a cello concerto in 1872 where the only big romantic concerto at that time was Schumann from 1853, but nobody played it. Schumann never heard it in his lifetime.
Wow. People
thought it's weird, and there was some cellists who tried it but then gave it up. So Saint-Saëns said, I'm going to write for cello, because he wanted to attract attention in Paris as a composer. And not only that he decided to write for us, thankfully, he also said, I'm going to start with the cello right in the beginning, after one chord.
Right.
I'm not going to wait a big tutti and then have the cello come in. I'm going to surprise everybody by just one chord and then have the cello burst into emotions right away, which I think is so unique. If you can put yourself in the public in Paris in 1872, coming to hear a cello playing solo, which is already, why would I do that?
Right, pretty rare.
I have Paganini, I have Liszt playing piano. Why would I want to hear a cellist playing a cello concerto? Never heard that before. So you're there, and then you're expecting to wait 2-3 minutes from a tutti to hear the orchestra play, and then comes a cellist. No, you hear a chord, and then the cello comes in and says, here I am. And that was huge, and it made him famous. It really made him a famous composer.
Amazing.
So as a performer, one has to always take it into account. Mm-hmm. When you start this piece, like an actor, you have to be surprised by the beginning, even though you know the answer. You know that after one chord, you're going to start. So I told Yaniv today, the conductor and the orchestra, that tomorrow on Sunday when we play the concert, what I want to have is I want to tune backstage. I want the orchestra to be ready. I want to walk on stage, bow, sit down, and boom, here's a chord, and be surprised by it. Even though I won't be surprised, but we have to get that character, that feeling to the audience.
That's
we have
awesome.
to convey it. So this is huge. This is a piece that is not so easy to play. And it's like, sort of, when I play it, it's similar to the Bach suites, and it's similar to I always think of the story of creation in a way, in the Old Testament, where, it's a bang, but it's also a story that everybody knows.
Yeah.
But whenever you go back to it, you find something new about it. So the older you get, the more experience you have with it, the more you find in it.
As you're visiting a piece, and this is such a perfect example because I feel like things that you learn in your teens are really in your DNA as being the first challenging things that you learned. As you grow, what kinds of things did you find decade after decade that were new challenges?
Well, so many. But first of all, technically, I find that as I get older, I have to get rid of old habits.
Right.
And they come back.
Right.
When you play a piece that you played as a teenager, all of a sudden bad habits that you used to do back then comes in physically.
Yes.
Physical, technical aspects. But more importantly, musically, when I was 15, let's say I was in love, so I looked forward in life to be with somebody, to be in love, then you can show it in the music. But then you find somebody, you get married, then you have kids. It's a love that you cannot express in words to anybody if they don't have kids.
Right.
And that comes into your music making. Then you have kids and they're young, but then your kids become teenagers. And you're dealing with different kind of love and relationship with them and with your wife. When I played the Saint-Saëns in my mid-20s, I met my wife.
Right.
And then we got married. Now we've been together almost 20 years. It's a different kind of friendship, love, relationship that it's different. So when you play the second theme of Saint-Saëns, the love theme, that love had future when I played it when I was 15, then now it has present, and maybe when I'll be 70, it will have past.
Right.
You know, it's totally different approach to love, and also love for a teenager is not a love for a father.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's not the same. So when I'm here in Bellingham playing Saint-Saëns and I miss my kids so much, love has different meaning to me. So when I play the second theme and I think about my kids, it's a totally different feeling than when I was 15 and I thought, how can I talk to this girl and even get her attention?
Right.
Everything gets perspective.
Absolutely.
And it's totally different, and it comes out in your music making.
And I feel like every time you perform a piece, as time passes on, then that piece carries the memories of the prior performances and the prior experiences.
Absolutely. So the Saint-Saëns has been with me now for a long time, but funny enough, in last season I played it, I think, 7 or 8 times, which is a lot. And playing it today in the dress rehearsal brought me back to those occasions right away. So all of a sudden I'm not in Bellingham, I'm in Cleveland.
Right.
And then I played it at the Kennedy Center last time. And so it brings me back to those occasions, and then it brings me back to the first time I played it as a child. So everything comes together, and one thing for sure, it's not boring.
Right.
When my students say, "Oh, I have to play this piece again," I said, "Guys, be thankful that you are asked to play it again, because you can go deeper and deeper and deeper." And those masterpieces are just so monumental that I feel thankful to be able to play it.
Absolutely, and grateful that they've come back again.
Yeah,
like an old friend.
Yeah.
I would love to talk a little bit about your early childhood. You grew up on a kibbutz.
Yeah.
And how did you find music, and how did the cello get in your hands?
Well, growing up on a kibbutz, now I realize it's very different than many people, but for me it was, of course, natural. I grew up, the kibbutz is a social community of about 500 people, middle of nowhere, agriculture, smaller than Bellingham even. And it was heaven. For kids, it is heaven. I used to run barefoot outside for months. You know, we don't wear shoes. Nature all around. In my classroom, we grew up 6 kids in the classroom. So the attention from teachers, we had such personal attention to each one of us. And in 4th grade, when I was 10 years old, part of education was to start an instrument. And I picked up the cello because of a girl who played cello, and she was older than me. And in such a small environment, small society, if somebody is older than you in 4 years, you don't talk to them. They're much older than you. They're cool.
Right.
You're the young one. And this girl who played the cello, luckily, now I say luckily, the music room was under our classroom, sort of in a basement. And I used to hear her practice every day. And back then I played basketball a lot, and I would get ready to go to training after school, and I would hear her practice still. And that attracted me so much to her and to the music and to what she did. I didn't know what a cello is, but it was something I really wanted to get close to. So when I was asked, I would never come up and say, I want to play cello.
Right.
But when the music teacher asked each one of us, said, Amit, what do you want to play? And I said, cello, like Rinat. This is the name of the girl. And I really thought innocently that if I play the cello, I will marry her.
Wow.
That was very clear to me. because I thought we will have lessons together, we'll play together, and we'll get married.
Yeah.
Very simple. And I never talked to her. And
Wow.
all through middle school and high school. Only in recent years we got in touch. She lives now in London, and we became really good friends. And of course, she knows the story, and she always joke about it because she was apparently not a good. I never heard her play really in concert, but she said, at least one good thing happened from my cello playing, which is you playing the cello now.
That's amazing.
And she's thinking now about starting again the cello. And I told her, next time I'm in London, I want to play a duet with you.
Absolutely.
And so it's really emotional and fun. And that's the story. It's sort of a simple story. My parents are not musicians. I'm not in a lineage of musicians who, I was forced to do it as part of my education. No, not at all. I was a regular kid growing up in a kibbutz, playing basketball, being a normal, cool kid, and starting to play the cello. And as I realized that I will never talk to her through the cello, I really fell in love with the cello.
When you decided that you were in love with the cello, did basketball have to take a back seat, or did you try and do both for a while?
I did both for a while, and until high school, I did both. And in high school, I had to make a decision because both were really serious. It was a daily thing and many hours every day. And my cello teacher, in fact, told me, he didn't say you should quit, one of them, but he said, it's now so serious that you need to practice 3-4 hours a day cello, and you do the same with the basketball. And I don't want to make the decision for you, but probably you need to decide soon what to do. And I remember myself sitting in my room trying to decide, and the trigger to stay with music was that I was not tall enough to play basketball, but now I'm 6'5".
Right.
So back then I wasn't 6'5", and I said, there's no way I will make it to the NBA. I'm not tall enough.
That's fascinating.
And I decided to stop, and now I'm 6'5".
I know.
But I think it was an excuse for me. I had to find an excuse to stay with the cello, because it wasn't even in my mind to stop the cello. I tried to find reason to stop the basketball so I can stay with the cello. I didn't look for even one reason to stop the cello. So now thinking back of it, I needed an excuse to stay with the cello. Cello was really a love story from first day. And my parents never told me to practice. It was never an issue. I was curious about it. I wanted to practice. And basketball is still a passion. I'm gonna watch the highlights of the NBA of today. And yesterday we had dinners with the donors, and afterwards I went to my room and watched the whole game of Golden State against Boston.
Oh, that's great.
So I love it. I love it, and I go as much as I can to watch games with my kids. It's a passion and it's love, and it influences each other. So a lot of my teaching and my approach to playing is very physical and sort of from the athletic point of view.
Absolutely.
So I'm very thankful that I've done it, but cello is who I am.
That's amazing. So at what point did you get a teacher who helped foster that, like your teacher who said, okay, now you're getting pretty serious? How did you get into the collegiate and that, teen and early 20s age group?
Well, I started when I was 10, which apparently is pretty late. I didn't know that, but it's pretty late. So from 10 to 14, I had a teacher in our local music school in the middle of nowhere where I grew up. And as much as I loved him and he invested in me, he wasn't maybe the greatest teacher. I didn't really know what I'm doing, but I enjoyed it and I loved working with him. He saw, I guess, my talent, so he spent hours and hours with me, not just 1 hour lesson, 3 hours, and he would come on weekends to our house, and I loved him. Luckily, the flute teacher in that little music school, I mean, it's 2 rooms.
Right.
I mean, that's
tiny.
It's 2 rooms. But that flute teacher came once a week from Tel Aviv, from the big cities, like coming to Bellingham from New York once a week. It's a big thing. He was famous. He came and he taught me chamber music. I didn't like him because he was very demanding, but he saw something in me. And when I was 14, he took my parents aside one day and he said, he needs to go to the big city to a real teacher or it will be too late. So like right now.
This is it.
And my parents said, okay, if you think so, would you recommend? And he talked to a teacher. And once it was settled that I will go and play for him, an audition, my parents told me, and I started crying. I remember running away from the house and being really upset. Like, why do you do it to me? I'm very happy. I love my teacher. I really loved my teacher. And they said, we're not doing anything. We just want you to try. It's a recommendation of this flute teacher. Let's just give it a try. And I was really upset, but I did try. And my audition was to play a C major scale. I didn't know what else to play. But that teacher was a really great teacher for kids and very tough. And he said, let's try for 3 months. And he said, I will ask you to practice 3-4 hours a day. And my parents and I thought, 3 hours a day? Are you crazy? Yeah. So in the music room in the kibbutz, we arranged like a place for me with a bed and a couch. Gosh. No, really, so I can rest, because we thought 3 hours is what I do in a month.
Right.
To do it every day, I will need to rest. So my mother put cookies there and a jar of juice. Aww. So when I practice, I could rest, in between sessions. And we thought this is crazy.
Right.
But I tried, and he wrote down, I still have the notebook, he wrote down on a minute what I need to do, like 20 minutes this etude, 10 minutes this, 5, and it came up to 3-4 hours. So that first year, I woke up at 5 in the morning every day, and I did 90 minutes cello, went to school, did basketball training, another 90 minutes of cello, then homework, then went to sleep. And I remember that year, one of my lessons, I had to go to Tel Aviv, it meant 3 buses.
Wow. And
my parents, one of them would come with me because I was too young to take the buses by myself. And it was 3 hours ride. So I would leave school early. It was Thursday, I remember. I would go to a lesson and then have the lesson. And one time, the lesson was at 5 p.m. My watch went on, like the alarm went on, and my teacher said, why do you have an alarm? And I said, I'm sorry. It was 5 p.m. instead of 5 a.m. And he said, why do you wake up at 5 a.m.? And I just very innocently, I told him, well, because I have to practice 3 hours cello and basketball, I can't do it. I have to do half of it before school. And he never forgot that. He always reminded me, even until today, like that I never had a student.
Discipline.
And it was, since then, I always wake up early in the morning and practice. And I was very, very shy person coming from the kibbutz. The lesson would start in Tel Aviv with this big name teacher. He would say, how are you? I said, okay. And he said, what did you do during the week? I said, nothing. And he said, can you tell me anything about it before we start? No. And every week it was the same routine. And then one day he said, if you're not going to tell me what you did during the week, I will send you home. You have to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, the next week, come in, how are you? Okay. What did you do during the week? Nothing. Sorry, you have to go home. And we went home.
Wow.
I had to take all those buses back home without a lesson. And that was the best lesson of my life, because the next week I came and I had to start talking. Mm-hmm. And I never stopped ever since.
He had to
But he opened me up.
Open it, yeah.
And it became really an important lesson of communication that ever since became a sort of a light torch for me, also with my students, with my kids. The fact that you have to communicate. You cannot just sit there and play. You have to communicate with words, with emotions, with music, with whatever you do. And that lesson, I will never forget, that feeling of disappointing him. So being myself and just say nothing. And then coming next week and being able to talk to him.
It's an amazing lesson. Yeah. It's incredible. I love to talk about musical moments that really affected you. In that time, did you ever get taken to a concert or have the opportunity to hear a performance that just knocked your socks off and just solidified, I'm going for this?
It's fun. It's funny that you ask, because I can see that you're a musician, because I'm sure you have those moments too.
Absolutely.
But so growing up in a kibbutz, I never heard like real great musician in front of me. I heard recordings. Of course, we didn't have YouTube or those things. We didn't have internet. It's the 80s.
Yeah.
So I remember going to a summer festival with this new teacher. I was 14, and we had a youth orchestra. And one of the soloists that summer was a violin teacher who was one of the leading teachers in Israel, but not Yitzhak Perlman, not Zuckerman, not one of those, but a leading teacher in Israel. And he played Mozart's Violin Concerto No. 5. And I will never forget in my life his entrance after the tutti. I just didn't know that a string instrument can sound like this. I just never heard it, and it stuck in my head forever. I thought he's God. I really thought, I never heard anything like it in my life, and I will never forget it. And that was a turning point completely. Like then I used to see him in the dining hall in the summer festival. I thought, this is God. Like this guy was God for me. And he was just an ordinary teacher, but I never heard a professional player playing like this. So that was one moment that I would never, ever, ever forget as a musician. The other one was when I was 16. I was chosen to play as a soloist with our school orchestra. So back then I was in a special art high school, like Fame, the TV show.
Yep.
And when I was 16, I was chosen to go to Paris as a representative of the school and to play the Kol Nidre with the European Philharmonic Orchestra. Like, wow, in Zal Gavo, in one of the most famous halls in Paris. And this, here I am, this kibbutznik, we say, this kid from a kibbutz who walks barefoot and works with the cows and milks them and,
in
playing basketball. And I'm going to Paris to play Kol Nidre in this hall. So I remember the first note the orchestra played, and then I prepared with piano, of course, with my teacher, and I got a scholarship, I won a competition. I was a cellist by then. It was clear, I was 16. But to fly, that was the first time I was on a plane when I was 16. Not like my kids who've been all over the world already. And flying to Paris, being in a hotel, and then being escorted to this hall, and then playing and representing my country, my school, and playing this piece, the Kol Nidre, which is a very Jewish-oriented piece, and playing it in Paris with this amazing orchestra. Like today, I would be happy to play with them too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
Incredible.
I played, and I remember Zal Gavo has a lot of mirrors all over. And I'll never forget those mirrors, how I look up and I see myself all over the place.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was a good concert or not. I just know that I played and I never felt so good. Like, wow, this is what I want to do in my life.
Yes.
And I felt in my element, and this was amazing. And ever since, I've played the Kol Nidre hundreds of times and recorded it. Whenever the piece starts, I go back to that Zal Gavo, this hall in Paris, where I'm 16 and I'm playing it. And there's a tape cassette of that concert. I don't know where it is. I lost it, but if I would ever find it, I would be so grateful.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are no videos, but to have that tape cassette. And in the beginning of the concert, first half, we played a quartet. So there were 4 of us playing a quartet, and then the second half, I played the concerto. But in the quartet, we played a piece that was written by a living composer who came with us, a Jewish composer. And I will never forget, because a violist who is one of my best friends today, until today, he had to start this piece with a solo viola. And he was too nervous. Just couldn't start. So we are sitting there in Zal Gavo. I'll never forget this feeling. The 4 of us, 4 kids, like planted in Zal Gavo in this famous hall, full of people. And the piece has to start. And this kid next to me, who is my best friend, cannot start.
He's just frozen.
So the composer, I remember, goes to the from the hall to the back door and looking at us like, what are you doing? What's happening? And finally he started. But that feeling of anxiety, not for me, for my friend, something that I will always remember as well, of what can happen on a stage to somebody where everything is fine and then all of a sudden you freeze and you can't play.
Right.
And so comfort feeling when I have students and I force them to perform something, a Bach suite or senior recital, and they freeze and they can't do it, I always feel a little bit sorry for them, but also understanding that this can happen. We're human, and you have to go through it. And to have your best friend going through it next to you, I always respect it. So maybe it's also the three really memories from childhood that I will never, ever forget.
They're fantastic, and they really, everybody's are so clear in their own mind, and it ends up really formulating how you go forward. I mean, stage fright is a perfect example. Have you always found a way for yourself to combat it? Have you never had it? How has that experience been for you as the kind of concerts and the importance level continue to rise, and you get these bigger and bigger moments? Do you look back on them going, wow, I was young, so I didn't realize how terrifying that was? Or can you stay in your body?
I think if people tell you that they are not terrified, they're lying. I really do. Being nervous in front of 2,000 people, playing pieces with so many details, is absolutely normal, and it's necessary. If you're not nervous, something is wrong with you. If you're the president and you go on national TV and you give a speech and you're not nervous, something is wrong with you. You can rise to the occasion if you're great, if you have charisma, but if you're not nervous, it's wrong. So, of course, I get nervous every time. But I do love to be on stage, and I do love to fight it, and I do have sort of a... I call it my insurance company, which is my last 35 years of doing it. And it has never happened that I went on stage, I started playing, and I had a mistake, and I bowed to the audience and I left. Like,
you can be sure that won't be.
I dealt with it. And yes, blackouts will happen. Mistakes will happen. But it's dealing with it that is what's special. And really sharing a story, sharing emotions. And I love doing that. So I know, and once you do it every week of your life, you have to tell yourself, and I did, at some point I said, you cannot be nervous to a point where you have a nervous breakdown, because then you cannot be a performer. So either you deal with it and you find a way to enjoy it, or you stop. And what helps me is the notion that I know that I will be on stage. It's like, it's not going to change. I'm going to be there. I'm going to walk. I know how I'm going to walk there. I know what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to play, how I'm going to play, most likely. That's sort of an assurance for me. Every time something new happens, and a mistake will happen where you didn't expect it, and magical happen, or magical moment will happen also where you didn't expect it. And that's the beauty of it. But dealing with it, for me, was a sort of a decision. I love it. I love playing. And also the preparation level. I always make sure that I'm as prepared as I can. And it's always new. Every week is a new journey. But the assurance that I've done it, and I've been there, and I've dealt with it before, helps me a lot.
It gives you almost a deja vu sensation of like, well, I've done it before and I survived that and it was fun. So here we go. I can do it again.
And it is fun. And every time, we talked about the Saint-Saëns in the beginning, every time I play it or any other piece, it takes a different form because of the people you play it with and the people you play it for. It's just different energy. So you need to be, as I always say, a great musician is somebody who is curious and flexible. That's it. If you're flexible to adjust to the orchestra you play with and to the conductor and the hall and the people, that's amazing quality. And if you're curious to always learn and not to say, okay, I played it 2 million times, now let's do it the same way. No, I'm curious. Like if Yaniv, the conductor here in Birmingham, telling me, let's start it a little slower. Why? And he gives you a reason. You say, wow, that's a good reason. I'm flexible enough. Let's try it. And if your curiosity and flexibility are there, you will always grow. Absolutely. Always grow. So as a teacher, if I can teach my students to be those two things, flexible and curious, I did my job. If I teach them to memorize what I do, I failed completely.
Absolutely. those magic moments. Can you tell us about one or two that in your career stick out as kind of pinnacle experiences where you'll never forget it?
Well, the first one was not a magical moment I created. I was witnessed to, and it's when Rostropovich came to Israel. It was 1994, and I was very young. I was during the army in Israel, but I got a chance to go to the dress rehearsal of the Dvořák Concerto that he played, and it was his 65th, I think, birthday, and the hall was packed. And I remember it's the first time in my life. Of course, I knew his recording, his video, and by then I was very serious cellist and musician. But in the beginning, in the exposition, there was one moment that he played taga daga 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 ta da da dee dee, and that C that happened twice. He played it so soft that in the Tel Aviv the hall, 3,000 people hall, you could hear a needle drop. I mean, it was such a pianissimo that I've never heard in my life. I didn't know that it's possible to create such a pianissimo in such a big space and be heard. And so I will never forget that moment. I always tell my students that from that performance, what I remember is those two C's, high C's that he played. And then the rest of it was great. It was the usual great, but those two, and that moment made me realize that this is what people remember. So searching for magical moment has become the reason for me to play the cello.
Cool.
And the magical moment became sort of a joke for my students, because every movement they play, not just a piece, every movement, I always ask them, where are those, let's say, 3 potential spots where time will stop and people will stop breathing. And that will be the magical moment. So if you have those spots, you can spontaneously on the stage decide which one of the 3 would be the one. But I believe you should go on stage knowing that you have those options.
Right.
And magical moment, it doesn't have to be soft, it could be also loud, but it's a moment where time stops, where nobody, and that feeling that you can, like my teacher Bernard Grinas used to say, it's like you grab the heart of your public and you start turning it around.
Yes.
Any way you want.
Yep.
And wherever, whenever you want.
Yeah.
And that feeling of power is dangerous, but it's also so satisfying.
Absolutely.
And music allows you to do it. And I hope that tomorrow, in the Renaissance, we can achieve that.
Absolutely.
Because there's certainly few of them that I know where I want to do it. And I hope that the orchestra will go with me, and I hope to dare to do it and to take it to the extreme in that moment. But I know that if it will succeed, that's what people will remember, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, that it is so captivating to receive that kind of power from an artist, and you will remember it forever. And it could be something as simple as 1 or 2 notes in the middle of a line, but time stops. No one's thinking about anything but what they're hearing. No one's breathing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's something you will never forget. And even trying to verbalize it, to discuss it with a student. Where is your magical moment in this movement?
Yeah.
What do you mean? It's not just where is the climax, or where is the basement of the phrase, or where is the moment where you think time can stop? And there are only few performers that are able to do it, I think, where you can, like my colleague at Peabody says, Leon Fleischer, where you can walk freely on a firm ground.
Yes.
That's not so easy to do, where
Yes.
you have the pulse, you have everything going in the music, but you're walking freely.
It's a beautiful way of describing it. Absolutely. I'd love to take a chance to jump ahead and hear the story about how you got to play that beautiful cello of Pablo Casals. How did the experience unfold that you ended up being privy to that moment?
Well, that's an amazing story. When I started to play, going back to 4th grade, I started like we all do when you start school. It's September, and I was 10 years old. But in December, where here most people celebrate Christmas, in Israel we celebrate Hanukkah. And it's basically the same thing. You eat and get presents. And same thing was in my family, and my parents wanted to encourage me with the new thing, with the cello. So they went to the next town and to the music store, and they wanted to buy a tape cassette because it's the early 80s. This is what we used to do, boombox and tape cassettes. And they asked the guy in the store, can we buy a tape cassette with cello? So he gave them, I still have the tape cassette, Pablo Casals playing short pieces for cello and piano. And they gave it to me for Hanukkah as a present. And I have 3 sisters, so we were in one bedroom, the 4 of us. And so we had 2 bunk beds. And I was sleeping on the upper bed, and I had this boombox in my bed. So every night I would put this tape and press play and fall asleep with it.
Yep.
And in the morning it would be done. You know, I would be asleep. But every night that's how I would fall asleep. And I remember how I'm falling in love with cello, with the sound that I didn't know how to make. I never heard live.
Yeah.
But I heard it in this tape, and it was so comforting and so amazing that I felt I needed it to fall asleep. Back then, if somebody would tell me, one day you would be playing
That
this
cello.
same cello that you're hearing now, I mean, it's like telling a little kid who plays basketball, one day you'll play with Michael Jordan in the same team, and that's how much it is. So from that moment to study cello, to make decisions, to become a musician, to go to the army, to go to study in America, to go to study in Europe, then to get a job at Johns Hopkins at Peabody, and then to meet, out of the blue, I met the guy who ran the Kennedy Center after a few years of teaching at Peabody. And I met him because my manager arranged for me to play for him. It was an audition. So I came there to DC, to Strathmore Hall, where they present concerts as well. And he gave me 20 minutes because it was a concert of Gil Shaham, the great violinist. And that presenter, Neely Pearl's name, said, okay, I will listen to your artist, but I only have 20 minutes before the show, and I will meet him and he can play for me. So I prepared really well and I played for him. And he really liked it. And he told me, I love your playing, but you're not Yo-Yo Ma. I cannot represent you at the Kennedy Center because nobody will buy tickets. But when I present Yo-Yo Ma, it will be a full house. However, I play cello, he says, as a hobby. Will you be my teacher? So, I really didn't expect this. So I said,
wow.
Well, sure, but it's going to be expensive. That's what I said.
Wow, good for you.
I had chutzpah, as we say. And he said, I like it. Good. Let's do it. And he started coming every week for a lesson.
Wow.
And I charged him a lot of money. It was I called him my ATM machine for a while.
Yeah.
And he took it very seriously. And we became really good friends. And he invested a lot in it. And at one point, he said, Amit, you're so good. And I really want to help. You need a better instrument. I don't know how to do it, but I know Marta Casals-Istomin, the widow of Pablo Casals. I don't think she can help you with an instrument, but I think it would be very good for you to know her. So he arranged for me to play for her. And he came with flowers, and I came with him, and she's sort of an old style lady, aristocrat, and we came to her apartment, which is just in front of the Kennedy Center. She still lives there.
Wow.
She's now 85. And we came in, and he gave us a flower. He sat next to her, and I played for her. And I played on my cello back then, and I started with Bach, the prelude from the first suite, and she said, when I was done, she said, Amit, I usually, when I hear a young artist like you, I shut my ears off right away. But I didn't do it. And I was so happy. And I said, oh, thank you, Mrs. Casals. This is such an honor. Thank you so much. And she said, do you mind if I give you some comments? I said, oh no, absolutely, please. And then she killed me. She literally killed me. She said, why do you do this? And why is this tempo?
Wow.
And then she says, the maestro, as she referred to Casals, the maestro used to play it like this, and you should listen to his recording. And then she said, well, play the Allemande, the next dance.
Yeah.
Okay, play the Allemande, same thing. I like it, and I like your vibrato, and I like your sound. But why? What? Ta, 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 ta.
Wow.
And then she said, play some Dvořák concerto. So I went through the entire repertoire.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's
eventually she
amazing.
said, well, let's have a glass of wine.
Wow.
Which of course, I said,
Sure.
oh, absolutely. So I sat next to her, and I'm 6'5". She's a tiny lady. And she looks at me and she says, you're a big guy. And the maestro was very small. But would you like to come and try his cello? Just like this.
Heart attack.
And
That's amazing.
she said, would you have time to... I said, of course I'll have time. This
Yeah.
would be a dream come true. And she said, well, I will be in July. This was like May, I think. I will be in July in New York, in my apartment in New York, where the cello is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can come and try the cello. She didn't say, I'm going to give you...
Yeah.
You can come and try the cello. So I looked at Neely, my friend, like, okay, and we planned it, and he came with
Wow.
me. And in July, we came to New York, and she greeted us, and we came in, and she sat right next to me, like the way you sit next to me now, very close. And she gave me the cello. I opened the case, and it was out of tune, a little dusty.
Yeah.
I could smell the pipe
Wow.
of Pablo Casals, who used to play with a pipe. And of course, I was shaking just to hold it.
Absolutely.
Like, it brought me back to my childhood, to the bunk bed and the tape.
Absolutely.
And I could only think of my mother. Why are you not here with me now?
Absolutely.
Listening to this and just seeing this. Even now, my hair is like...
Yeah.
And then I had to play, but the cello was out of... It was like an old man that you just take out of the grave and say, okay, run!
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Just leave me alone. So it was not the most beautiful experience, I can say, to play it, and not so rewarding, because I had this vision and I had this sound in my soul, in my mind, but then it didn't come out.
Right.
And also it's an instrument that is known to be difficult to play.
To make. Yeah.
And then you have her sitting in front of me, expecting it to sound like him right away.
Right.
So I played on it, and as I'm playing, I got used to it and could find what's so special about it slowly. And eventually, the time was over, and I thanked her, and I really thought, honest to God, that this was it. This was the best day of my life. We both went out. We went to have like a New York sandwich, beef sandwich, I remember. And we looked at each other and we said, this was the most... Because
Incredible.
he's a cello lover as well,
Right.
Neely. And we had the best time just looking at this instrument and feeling it and smelling it. And he suggested to me, he said, I know her well. You should probably send her handwritten note, thank you note, rather than an email, because she's from that generation.
Yeah.
So I went back home. I told my wife, my kids about it. It was really unbelievable experience. And I
Absolutely.
even wrote an essay about it, which
Amazing.
I'm very proud of. A Cello Day in New York, I call it. And I went back and I wrote her a letter. And I said, thank you so much. And this was a dream come true, and I'll never forget it. And thank you for your time, and blah, blah, blah. 2 weeks later, I get an email from her. Not a letter, an email. Thank you for your letter. You're so kind. And I was thinking a lot about it, and I would like you to play the cello for a while and be an ambassador for the maestro's legacy. And I also want you to find your own voice through this cello. And it's something I didn't understand back then. The ambassador for the legacy, I didn't understand. Finding your own voice, I didn't. So when I got the cello, I started playing on it. And of course, everywhere I went, people wanted to hear the Casals cello and the
Right.
Casals sound. But there was some issue with it. It was difficult to make it sound. And after 3 months, I called her. And I said, Mrs. Casals, I'm sorry if it sounds too direct, but I have to be honest with you. I've played in some places where I've played before. People know me there, and both them and me feel that something is not right. It's not my sound. Something is wrong with the instrument, and I would like to ask your permission to take it to a luthier in New York, because she had to, in the agreement, it says every time you take it to a luthier, it has to be her approval
Absolutely.
and a person that she assigned to.
Right.
It's not anybody.
Right.
And she said, you know what? Thank you for being honest with me. And we both went together to New York to that luthier, and she needed a few days to look at the cello. And her name is Julie Reeds. She's a wonderful cello maker and restorer. And after few days, we got the verdict. And she said that this cello needs big restoration. After probably more than 100 years that nobody touched it. Casals never dealt with that.
Right.
And she said it will need to be open and being taken care of, and so many things. And Mrs. Casals said, I'm up for it.
Wow.
I would like to make sure before I go that this cello is ready for the next generation.
Wow.
And it took more than a year for the cello to be restored. And if you're interested, there's the Wall Street Journal, they did a big article
Absolutely.
about the restoration. I'm just a small part of it, but they made a big feature about the restoration of the cello, a big article.
Wow.
And after 1 year, I got it back, and it was like a wild horse that is ready to run.
Amazing.
It was, and I felt that this is now shining again. And the sound, there's a video on YouTube where I got there before her to the shop, and luckily there was a video camera. I'm so happy because I was playing it just for me. I didn't see her coming, but the camera caught her. And I'm playing the cello, and I really felt this is, wow. You feel it in your gut, the sound of it, and how it is ready now to be played. And she arrives, and she's quiet, and she's looking. And I played. I didn't see her, and I finished the piece, and she's like, oh, Paulito. She called it like Paulito, which is like a nickname for Pablo. And it was very emotional. And then we sat and talked, and then I took the cello and started playing on it.
Wow.
And I felt that from that moment on, she sort of gave me the permission to find my own voice.
Absolutely.
Through it. And I felt after that year of restoration that I'm allowed also to find my voice and not his voice through the cello. And I also realized that these kind of great instruments, if you learn how not to disturb them, they will allow you to find your own voice. And I've learned so much from being able to play such a complex and delicate instrument.
Absolutely.
Where you cannot just put the bow and play it. It just doesn't work.
Right.
You have to find a way not to disturb it, and then it gives you a whole world of colors. And that moment where she sort of allowed me to find my voice was an amazing moment I'll never forget.
It is. There's so much trust, and she was very brave.
Yeah. To even do the restoration.
Yeah.
And that also led me, finding my voice with it also led me to write the children book about it and all that stuff that came after, which really made me realize what my voice is, which is not necessarily just to sit on stage and play. It's to educate, to conduct, to do the cello gang that I do, to play for kids, to read the book for kids. And so all those things that I do these days, and probably it will become more and more, but it's branching out to much more than just going in the evening and play on stage with orchestra.
You're taking your ambassadorship seriously. It's all those aspects.
Yeah, but it's ambassador of me.
All of it,
and not
of music.
Maybe just him. It's what I believe can be done with music and through music.
Absolutely.
And I would never find it without this cello. So this cello really helped me, without me knowing it back then, to find my voice and to see where is my call in this music world, which is not necessarily to do what I do here, which is to play, of course, but it's more than that. Even here in Bellingham, the first day I arrived a day early, and I played for the elementary school, the public school here, for more than 100 kids. And I sat there on the floor, not on stage, and they were all around me. And I spent an hour with them, playing for them and reading the book, a cello named Pablo.
So great.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to my next question for you, which is your experiences. You're on the road a lot. You get to these different cities, and then you have all of these amazing events, donor dinners, playing for children, dress rehearsals, all of these different things all over the world. How have you found a way, or are you working on finding a way to rejuvenate your own energy, and how do you sustain the rigorousness of it all, of wanting to be in top form to play, wanting to share, presenting for children is a ton of energy, and performing a concert is a ton of energy, and they're different. Flying is a ton of energy, and just the whole experience requires so much output. How do you find a way, or what do you do to put it back in?
It's a very good question, because you need to find a way, because otherwise you collapse.
Yeah.
And what leads me, what guides me, is that I love doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I don't do things that I don't love.
Mm-hmm.
Even I come here to this interview after dinner
A big
donors, and I played there for them. And the dinner is fine, and the food is good, and the company is good, but to play for them close by from 2 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and for them to understand, I didn't just play for them, I explained to them what it means to make sound on the cello today, for instance, because I wanted them to understand that your body is your Stradivarius, your body is what makes the sound. And I showed them an example how if I sit with a straight back, pushing it inward, my back, or bouncing my lower back, how my sound will be totally different. And they were shocked, completely shocked.
That's cool.
And when you do that and you make them understand it, it's something I love doing. So whenever I do something, I have a lot of energy. It's between things that I can collapse.
Right.
And this is really hard. So I've learned how to fall asleep on planes.
Yeah.
Like before the plane takes off, I'm asleep. I put headphones. I usually listen to Bruckner symphonies, and I'm asleep.
That's a good idea.
And I sleep really well. So airplane rides are, for me, a chance to get energy. I sleep.
Right.
So tomorrow night after the concert, I have a red-eye flight back home, and on Monday morning I teach.
Exactly.
For 8 hours. But I will sleep on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing. Another thing is to learn how to press the delete button. It's something that people don't realize, but when adrenaline kicks in, you get very excited, and then it's very hard to calm down.
Yes.
So after a concert, you need to eat and to have a drink and to talk and to have a party maybe, and then it's 4 a.m.
Yeah.
But you can't do it because at 4 a.m. you're already on the plane to the next destination. So can you learn to bring all this adrenaline out, to share it with the public, but then when you go to the hotel, can you press the delete button and go to sleep like a normal person?
Right.
You can talk to your wife and kids and fall asleep, and then wake up in the morning as a new person. It took me years to learn to do it. Years. Because you do get excited. You give a masterclass and you get involved with the students, and then there's a lunch and they ask you questions and you get excited. But then you have to take a nap because at 4 p.m. you have a rehearsal with the orchestra.
Right.
So you press the delete button. And I've learned that without that button, I cannot deal with it.
Yep.
I just simply cannot deal with this career. But with it, I can. And the last aspect, the third one of it, is to be in top shape. I mean, I call myself a musical athlete. And to be an athlete, you need to practice. LeBron James wakes up at 5 and go to the gym. Tiger Woods, after winning a tournament, will be in the gym the next day. Same goes with music. I cannot present myself to the world without playing my scales. I cannot present myself to the orchestra without practicing the parts. It's just not going to happen. I cannot teach without an hour of scales. I will never present myself to a fellow musician or a cellist without my warm-up routine.
Right.
Just not going to happen. So if the rehearsal is at 8, I'll be up at 6 and do my exercises. If it's at 7, I'll do it. And many times it happened when I finished the concert and I had a 5 a.m. flight to the next destination. I know that I sleep on planes, so I did not sleep at night. I practiced the next piece. Hotel conference rooms are my
best friend.
My best friends.
Wow.
I go to the hotel. I ask at the lobby, "Where's the conference room? Can I have it for a few hours?" They're always nice when it's at night. Nobody reserves them.
Yeah.
I go in. I sit there for a few hours. I practice, and then Uber to the airport, get on the plane, and collapse.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But that's the only way. Otherwise, I just don't. Just so many things happens, and it's so exciting that you just can't deal with it.
That's exactly where I always feel. It's just all so exciting. It's all so fun. Where is the dip for the recharge? My last question for you is about the fact that you're really a modern entrepreneur, and artists today really all need to learn to be entrepreneurs. It's such a different world than it was even 30 years ago. Yeah. Do you have any advice for the younger kids coming up that, regardless if they want to be soloists or orchestral musicians or chamber musicians, what kinds of things should they, do to put their best foot forward to try and get out into the community?
Well, again, there are two answers here. One, because as a professor in school, a lot of universities now are addressing it. They offer a lot of classes in entrepreneurship and pedagogy and how to do things and to get you prepared for the 21st century artist. I'm not so sure I'm for that so much, because the line between forgetting that you're a musician and you need to do well with your instrument first and foremost, and being an entrepreneur is a very thin line. And I feel today that a lot of people forget that. They say, well, I play the way I play, it's okay, that's who I am, but let's start a festival. And why people don't invite me, so let's do it myself.
Right.
But wait, are you good enough to be invited?
Right.
Are you good enough musician and performer and player and athlete to be out there on stage? So I want to make sure for myself, first of all, and then for my students, first and foremost, you have to be a good musician and a good instrumentalist. Don't ever forget that. Don't make compromises because it's much harder today, because there are many of us. There are many more than before.
Yes.
If you think that playing out of tune a little bit is okay today because anyway you're not playing in Carnegie Hall, no. You are playing in Carnegie Hall, it's just different walls.
Right.
It's the same levels that you need to play. So if your criteria is not as high, don't even go into it. However, if you have that mindset that you have to strive for greatness. Strive for greatness always, as a player, as a musician. If you have that and you achieve that level, by all means, go with your dreams. Go with your dreams. Don't wait for anybody to do it. I look back all the things that I appreciate that I've done, besides the usual ones. The children book, the orchestra, the cello gang, the CDs that I've made. It was all initiatives that I came up with and I wanted to do. And if I would wait for anybody to do it for me, that would never happen.
Exactly.
Just never happen. Never happen. So don't wait, do it, but at the same time, always listen to how you sound. And if it's not good, don't compromise. Don't feel, well, it's not good, but let's still make it because the old ladies over there were playing the old people home, they will not recognize it anyway. No. Right. No, you play in the highest level, then maybe the guy from the Kennedy Center will want to study with you. Maybe the widow of the most famous cellist will want to give you her cello.
Exactly.
And maybe, when people tell me, oh, you're so lucky with all the things, I don't think it's luck. No, it's not. It's you have to be ready and you have to be open to the opportunities. You have to make sure that when you see an exit on the highway, you take it.
Exactly.
You don't just go straight. But you have to be good.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you're not really good, I have a big problem with this kind of attitude of, Let's just be entrepreneurs and create and also about categorizing. I want to be a soloist. I want to be a chamber musician. I want to be an orchestra. No, you have to be the best musician you can. Life will decide for you what you do. But don't categorize, oh, he's a soloist, so he cannot listen. No, if he's a great musician, he's going to listen to the flute. Or if I play Dvorak Concerto and the clarinet that you play, if the clarinetist has a solo in the second movement, I'm accompanying the clarinetist. I'm not ashamed of it. That doesn't mean I'm a soloist or I'm a chamber. I'm just a musician. And you have to be good enough to do it all, and life will decide for you. That's it.
Thank you so much. It's been fabulous. We're so grateful to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Check out InsideTheNotes.com for videos and more information on our guests. Follow Inside the Notes podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to receive more information on our next guests.